Hello and welcome to the Divine Renovation Podcast. My name's Dan O'Rourke, and along with me, as always, Ron Huntley, Director of Coaching and Development at Divine Renovation. How you doing, buddy?
Great, pal.
It's good to see you. And Father James Mellon, how are you doing today?
I'm very well. I notice I don't have one of those big, long, complicated, fat titles. That was pretty good. Can you say that again? Director of well, welcome to the Divine Renovation. What do you call those things? When you
gavel.
A gavel, you know those guys that, an auction.
Well, oh, I see what you're saying. Ah, yes, with the quick speaking. I'm not that good. I'm not that good. But guys, we've got someone joining us a little bit later. We've got Matt Vaughan, who is one of the newer team members at Saint Benedict Parish. And we asked him to come on because we want to talk about catching culture and how when you bring in a new person into a parish environment, how they can catch the culture of that place. But before we talk about that, I want to talk about to you a little bit, Ron. How things have been going the last week?
It's been fun. I've been having a lot of fun. It's interesting in the network. Mm-hmm. One of the things I'm noticing really starting to take root is people's appreciation and understanding of strength finders, living your strengths, the Gallup tool. And people are getting to know each other better. They're really starting to value that tool in a new way as we go deeper.
So talk to me a little bit about Strength Finders and how it works and what it's all about.
Well, Strength Finders is a psychometrics. You can buy this book, right. And in the back there's a tag with a number, and you can just plug it into the computer, and it gets you access to an evaluation. And through that evaluation, it will determine, it'll spit out to you your top 5 strength themes. Mm-hmm. And the whole premise of it is that if you lean into your strengths, if you can name it, claim it, and lean into it, what will end up happening is that's where you will have your biggest impact. That's where you'll find your most joy. When you're serving in your ministry or your job or whatever it is you're doing and working out of your strengths, you'll have your biggest impact, which is kind of counter to the whole concept of why don't you get better at your weaknesses?
Because it's only when you lean into them that they actually become strengths, because what Gallup says is that these are actually themes of talent. So Don Clifton, who was the founder of this, he identified over 300 talents. And a talent, he says, is what you consistently do well with very little ability. It's like
little ability or little effort?
Little effort,
right.
Sorry, yeah. And he identified all these, and he grouped them into 34 themes of talent. So right. you can be hardwired a certain way.
So there's 34?
34. You can be hardwired a certain way, but it doesn't mean it's a strength yet.
Good point.
Because you've got to name it and claim it. You've got to understand it. And then you've got to lean into it. You've got to practice using it. And only then it becomes a strength. And the thing is that many people have got all kinds of innate talents that they haven't translated into strengths yet.
So that's a really cool thing. You used to use Strengths Finders with the team at Saint Benedict, right?
Yeah, we use it quite a bit because, one of the principles that's talked about in Divine Renovation is strengths-based ministry. And there are things that we're naturally good at. And what we found is that Clifton Strengths Finders is great, not necessarily to teach people what they will do, like people often look at those tools and say, I want to discover what ministry I should be in. No, this will teach you how you're going to do it.
Yes.
How you're going to do the thing that you're called to do. But the greatest thing we found with this tool was its ability to help us build teams and to function well as teams, to understand one another, so it helps you to build a balanced team. So right. In that sense, it's been very, very helpful. And we, over the years, developed a familiarity with it. Ron, you went and did some training, and
yes.
I've done some training with it as well, and we use it in our coaching network.
Yeah.
And so you're saying that our coaching network, the parishes in it, are using it more? Is that what?
Well, we're using it in our coaching sessions,
mm-hmm.
and some of and so we're doing, it's 2 things. One, I want to help them get to know themselves better and each other better.
Right.
But the other thing they're doing too, I also want to show them how easily they can use it in terms of their one-on-one coaching with their team or their one-on-one support meetings that they have with their key staff members, because it's not that difficult to read through the profile and just ask people questions like, how does that resonate with you? Can you give me a specific example? So these network churches, some of them are actually coaching into each other, and they're loving it. It's helping them get to know each other better. It's helping them be a stronger team, and also they're finding out a lot about themselves. Which, isn't it fun when we grow in our own self-awareness, mm-hmm. and when we realize, God, we're made on purpose. You're fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and when we can help people realize that, boy, that's pretty exciting. And that's what we want to help people do. So I've noticed that that's been going on.
It's easier than ever as well to actually identify your top 5 themes, because in the past, like you said, Ron, you bought the book and there was a key in the back of the book, but just Google Gallup Strengths Finder and you go online and you can fill in your credit. You can do it right online. You
Right.
actually don't even have to buy the book anymore. And there's actually an app. There's a Gallup Strengths Finders app, which is great. So once you set up an account, it's a straight transaction. You do the test. 20 minutes
and you
later,
can
you've
share
got
your
the
results with your friends. So
That's
you've
right.
given me yours, I've given you mine, and it's really cool.
You can
It's a
actually
good
get
one.
your top 34, although Gallup have kind of used they've marketed it well. It's a little bit extra money for the really curious.
Worth it, though.
It is actually worth it because there's also finding out what your bottom ones are. That's very, very interesting.
And humbling.
And humbling.
Just yesterday, I wanted to share this with you guys. I found it really moving, but we had an application into the Divine Renovation Network from a church in Portugal. And so I finally, yesterday, got a chance to connect. And this pastor's English is fantastic, Father Tiago. And he has 5 different churches. He's the pastor of 5 different
Like
churches.
5 different buildings?
5 different buildings,
Whoa.
yeah. And he has a church congregation of anywhere between 300 and 500 on any given weekend. And he just really he lifted up the book in Spanish, and he was talking about how he's using
The
it
Divine
with
Renovation
the
book.
Divine Renovation book. Sorry, yeah.
I remember reading his application. It blew me away. It was like, wow, his English was better than ours to begin with. And secondly, his sense of what matters.
I know.
And his sense of urgency and his clarity really, really impressed me. I thought, this is a guy we should get into the network.
It's so beautiful. And I was wondering, how could a fella with that few parishioners be able to be in the network, to be able to afford the fee? And when I asked him about that and told him the price, his eyes, got pretty big, and I realized, you can't afford it, can you? And he said, no. And I said, fair enough. I was asking if somebody was underwriting it for him, because that's the only way I could see him being able to afford it. But anyway, I said, I wonder if we could get you funding. It sounds like you'd be a great fit. You're very hungry. You'd be the first person in your entire country in the network. I said, why don't you leave that with us? Because, we have some very generous donors, and I know there's some people out there listening that are afflicted with wealth, and they might want to help support this man and his passion and his desire to do this.
And what we're talking about here is specific, that aspect of the Divine Renovation Ministry that we call the network, which is our coaching network. So
Absolutely.
This is a heavy investment in parishes. So it's up to, 50 sessions a year when you add up everything. And so it's quite an intensive investment in parishes. And so we try our best to come close to covering our expenses in that. So there is a price point to it, but our hope is with parishes. See, here's the thing. You get parishes that might have the resources, but do they have the openness? Do they have the hunger?
The desire, yeah.
And do they have the desire? And then you get a guy like this who struggles with the resources, and yet he gets it, and he's got the desire, and he's got huge capacity. So how do we help guys like that? How do we help get the right
And he's in
people?
Portugal, and we've never coached a parish in
He
Portugal.
said my Portuguese was pretty good when I complimented him on his English. I think he was just... so have I been speaking Portuguese?
Obrigado. That's all I know in Portuguese. And I found out that you don't say... I was going around, I was in Brazil a few years ago, and I learned obrigado, and I was saying to everyone, obrigado, obrigado, except I found out that when you say thank you to a woman, it's obrigada.
Oh,
So I was saying,
so you're insulting all the people.
Yeah, I was going around
Insulting every woman.
It was really bad.
Good try.
But Ron, you were telling me about this guy. Tell me a bit more about what his suggestion was in terms of what he thought he could pay, because this blew me away.
Well, this was beautiful because, I asked him, what would you be willing to, what would you be able to put towards this feed in order to get into the network? And he said 2 months worth of collections. And I just thought to myself, oh my heavens, this is a guy who's not looking for a handout. He's not looking for a freebie. He's looking to give, exponentially.
I mean, 2 months. I mean, just think about
That's how
that.
important
Think
it is
about
to
that,
him.
folks. If you're listening, pastors, if you're listening, do the math quickly. Do the math. That's 8 weeks of Sunday collections. This man is willing to put to invest into the network. That is incredible. That is incredibly humbling.
It is humbling.
So, well, we're going to ask folks out there who are listening to pray for Father Tiago and his parish in Portugal, and to pray if anyone feels called to help us help him, that'd be great. If you want to visit the website, there is a place to donate and leave us a note, and if you wish to designate it to help him. But that's
make sure it goes
certainly
straight
someone
there.
we feel called to
let's do
help.
that. Yeah, let's do that. If a donation of size comes into the website sometime in the next week, we'll just any donation that comes in, we'll earmark it for his parish, and because we do get donations through the website every week or two, we get some money that flies in that way. But let's set it aside specifically for him, because I mean, what a story. That's
Well, speaking of money, you guys are listening. If you're anyone's new listening, you're thinking, all these guys are talking about money. But I had a session just last night with some of the priests in the network, and one of the priests, I asked him, what's your biggest breakthrough? And well, one of them he kind of cheated. He told us 5 breakthroughs, but I'd be kind of let him
yes,
go.
He did cheat.
If you want 5 breakthroughs is wonderful, and they were 5 great breakthroughs. One of them, he said, it's every pastor's dream. He got a call from the accountant. Well, he got the financial reports from his parish, and he saw that there was $152,000 more than he expected in the account, and he was confused, and he called the accountant and said, "What is this?" And she said, "Well, over the last couple of years, the Sunday collection has been going up. This is what's in the bank because the collection has been going up." And he was oblivious because he wasn't checking in. He wasn't checking the Sunday collection. So we had a conversation. I mean, we celebrated that fact. That's great.
Celebrating.
And then we kind of slapped him around a little bit. I got the other priest to speak because the thing was, I said you should know your numbers. You should know your numbers, and it's not that whether your collection goes up or down in any given weekend. It should determine your mood for the week or anything, but you've got to have a sense of those numbers. So we had a great conversation around that, around checking your numbers, and he very sincerely was saying, well, why? Well, why should I have to know those numbers? He's a younger pastor. It's his first time. He's a great guy, very, very gifted. And I think what has caused this collection to go up, it's vision and passion, and the fact that when you begin to lead, when you actually exercise leadership and people experience the thing moving,
we respond,
and there's a compelling vision, people will respond. And so don't be surprised that the collection will actually go up. But one of the things we said to him is you need to have a sense of what the natural rhythms are. And sometimes as well, when you're actually preaching vision and living it in a real way, there are some parishioners who sometimes feel inspired to write a bigger check. And so if all of a sudden you notice a big bump, you might want to go and ask your accountant what happened, or whoever it is who does those things. And you might find out that a parishioner was inspired to write a bigger check. And I think people who are inclined to do that, it's not necessarily that they need the pastor to go and fawn all over them, but they need to know that you notice. You need to know that you just need a simple, I know what you did, thank you. I know what you did, and thank you. It makes a difference. And simple as that. But that's important thing for pastors to know. I think one of the things we'd love to do some point later in the year for the Divine Renovation Association is actually create a whole module on how to raise giving in your parish.
That's a great idea.
Look forward to doing that.
Love it. I was just thinking, maybe that church with the extra 150,000, maybe they'd like to support Father Tiago.
That's a great
if you're listening,
if you're listening,
no pressure.
And you know who you
we
are.
Didn't say your name.
You know who you are. You know what to do.
That's terrible.
This has gotten very awkward for a number of people listening. That's
I never thought of that.
Nobody's ever going to tell you. They're never going to report that to you again. We'll find ways to invest their money in the world. The other thing that I wanted to share with you guys, I'm really excited about. There are several people I know there's a church in Canada. There's several in the U.S. and there's one in the U.K. that are hiring. And they're thinking to themselves, they're recognizing the importance of the primacy of evangelization.
That's right.
And as a result, they're saying, how can I find that right person? Because it's not always obvious because we haven't thought that way before. But as we start to think that way, we start to realize what type of a person they need. And they're like, I don't know who that person is. And I would say to you, it's not because they don't exist. Because for lay people, you have 2 choices. Become a priest and make a difference, or just go to church regularly. For a lot of us, there's no middle ground. Right. And there's a job opportunity, there's a job market beginning to be created. There's a need that pastors see. Skill sets, passion, drive, desire, commitment in terms of evangelization and leadership development. And there's a whole world opening up. And so if you're listening and you're on fire for evangelization, maybe you're familiar with Alpha, maybe you'd be willing to travel, you want to get connected with a church that's in the Divine Renovation Network and see where you can go, I'm telling you, write to us, because there are people dying to connect with amazing...
That's a great idea. This podcast is turning into like a major commercial. Like, are you feeling right now that you're in a commercial? Well, you are. And maybe the Spirit of God is convicting people right now, because, Ron, it's amazing that you say that, because, again, last night and yesterday I met with one of our local priests here who's actually in the network. So both the Halifax parishes in the network are both hiring.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Amazing.
And it ties in with the previous thing about money. One of our parishes, he told us this last week when I asked the same question about what's your biggest breakthrough. A parishioner, they've been preaching vision for the last 6-7 months. They've been casting vision and pointing the way and really inspiring people. And they've been beginning to make some changes that, although in one sense are making, a small percentage of people upset.
Sure.
Because it's upsetting their preferences. But for people who get it, they're getting on board. A parishioner approached this priest and gave him a check that would cover a full year's salary.
Stop it.
Just like that.
Oh, it gives me
So they're on the lookout now to hire someone, again, to do what? To drive adult evangelization. And I just met with our other pastor in our diocese who's in the network, and they hired someone actually from the United States. So if you're listening from the United States, you can drop us a line.
But here's okay.
We've got parishes all over the place. But I'm not finished. Don't finish.
Don't you dare cut them off.
Wait.
I'm listening. Okay, I'm listening.
There's
Keep
more.
going.
Or as Steve Jobs used to say, there's one more thing. So also another Canadian parish is hiring someone as well. So that our discussion last night was amazing in terms of about 50% of the priests in my call last night with the guys have basically identified in the resources, they found the resources, and they're moving ahead with this.
But here's the thing. No. See, honestly, when I speak to a lot of our partners around the world, and it often comes. It's often related to when we're planning events and we're talking. And one of the things I hear most often, Father James, is no. Parishes in our community don't have money to hire anybody. Parishes can't hire anybody in our European country or in Canada. That churches aren't like that. Parishes don't have money. That we don't have staff. We can't hire staff. We're not like you. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is not matching what that feedback is. So help me understand it.
Change it. It's called change. Change means doing things differently. Doing things differently. That's the whole point. We're churches are failing all over the place. We're in decline because of the way we're doing it. If we want a change, we've got to change. I'm going to say that again. If you want to see a change, you've got to change. If you're listening right now, those of the parishes that are listening to this podcast, I presume that you're probably in that 16th percentile of parishes that are at least ready to innovate or be early adapters. And this means you. If you're on fire for this and you're curious about this and feeling called to lead in this direction, break out of your mold. Like, get out of your box. Don't be limited by what you've known.
It's cool.
We've got to think differently and begin to change it. And even if it's so much as starting with a halftime position, because even in these parishes that I'm speaking about who are hiring pastoral staff, it wasn't normative there either. It wasn't normal. But it's like anything. We're going to talk about culture later on when Matt comes in.
Yep.
Well, we're going to talk about catching culture. That presumes there's a healthy culture to catch.
You'll catch it healthy or negative. You'll still catch it.
That's right. We don't really want to catch the negative stuff, but how do you change that culture? Yes. You change it by starting to do things differently, and then you keep doing it until it becomes normal. Yep. And I dream of seeing in these countries where we constantly hear, but it's not like that here. It's not like that here. It's like, come on. Like, start changing it. Right, start doing it differently. And guess what? Eventually, once you start doing it differently, other people are going to realize, wow, it's actually possible? You mean we can actually do this in our country? And the more people do it, the more it's going to change.
Well, this is what I love about the network, right? I mean, like originally when you started this out, I mean, it was like, no, look, see what happened at Saint Benedict. Like we were able to hire staff and then more staff, and it kept growing. And then like it's not normal here. It's not normal here in Nova Scotia. But now it's not just look at Saint Benedict. Now it's look at this parish that's in the coaching network, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one.
And let's also be clear that when we talk about hiring staff, we're not talking about creating a kind of a professional class of doers, of people who do ministry. We're talking about raising up people who can lead, who can be leaders, eventually leaders of leaders, because we want to have people who raise others up. Because often people will say, all this talk about staff, why can't you just get volunteers? Well, yeah, unless your parish only has like 8 volunteers in your whole parish that can be supported by the priest. But try supporting 850 volunteers.
Exactly.
Good luck with that if it's just the priest. Like everything is driven by relationships, evangelization, discipleship, community, involvement in ministry, leadership. All of the essential components to parish renewal are driven relationally. How many vital relationships can one person have?
True. How many did Jesus have?
20 to 30 people max. You know, so if you're gonna build a church on people, which is really the only way to do it. I mean, Scripture talks about people as the living stones. You've got to invest in relationships. So we're not talking about staff members hiring people to do the work of ministry, but to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for the building up of the church, as it says in Ephesians 4.
It often, I agree. And so when you're hiring somebody, you usually have to hire them to do because they're creating something, but they have to have the capacity to then transition into leadership.
Right. That's right.
But you know, when you were talking about changing, and I was talking to somebody in Mexico the other day, and again, culturally, people don't invest in, they don't give much to the church. They don't have staff, clerical, or not clerical staff, pastoral staff, thank you. But the people of means give a lot of money to universities, Catholic universities, Catholic hospitals. They don't give to the church because they don't see the church being worth, like, it's not doing anything. It's not making a difference. It's
to
where
the parish church.
There's transactions happening, but not to the local parish. And so the money is there. It's being allocated. It's just not being allocated to parishes. But that's where I think most people would love to be a part of a parish that was where lives are being transformed, where their families are being engaged, where they're being fed spiritually, and they're growing like crazy. But it's almost like there doesn't seem to be a vision that that's even possible locally, and so they're not going to invest in it.
But that's the heart of it, is vision. You know, giving follows vision. That's what happened in this parish, and all of a sudden you realize, my goodness, we've got $150,000. The collection has just crept up. It's crept up. People have been inspired and saying, I want to be a part of that, and we've got to lean into that. You've got to preach vision. You've got to first live healthy stewardship, financial stewardship yourself as a leader, as a priest even, and then you've got to teach and preach on it and invite people to get on board. To get on board. But you're right, Ron. It's that lack of imagination, and that's hopefully at the heart of what we do with Divine Renovation, is help people to dream dreams. Doesn't they say that in Scripture? You know, in the book of Joel, when the Spirit of God is poured out, your young men were going to dream dreams. So let's call out to the Holy Spirit to move in our hearts, to touch our minds. Let's start dreaming dreams, and let's not. You know, I forget who it was that said, but if your vision for your church is not terrifying to you, then it's probably insulting to God. Let's dream God-sized dreams. Yeah. Again, another version of that. What I've heard, it wasn't me that said this, was if your pastoral strategy would work without God showing up, we might have a problem. And sadly, so many of our pastoral strategies, that's it. It's like there's a safety net, because it's like, well, this is what we're going to do, and if God doesn't show up at all, I think it might still work.
Right.
But what if God shows up? Yeah. You know, I really believe that God responds to expectant faith. If we build a strategy that doesn't expect God to do something crazy, guess what? God is probably not going to be able to work there. I mean, look at the ministry of Jesus. He could do no miracles in that place because there was not expectant faith. I mean, let's let God out of the box. Let's pray tonight. Everyone who's listening to this or watching, let's ask for the gift to dream God-sized dreams, to begin to daydream. Like, I give you permission, put your foot up on your desk and kick back and put your hands behind your neck and say, Lord, help me to dream a dream of what this place can be like, because the potential in every single parish is immense.
Amen.
I really believe that.
Amen.
It really is huge.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to cut it here, and we're going to come back and have a chat with Matt Vaughan about catching culture, and I think the potential in that young man is immense as well. So we'll get a chance to explore that with him. All right, thanks, guys. And we're back with Matt Vaughan, Communications Coordinator at Saint Benedict Parish, and guy with a smile.
That's right. Yes. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Good to be here with you guys.
Oh, no, it's awesome to have you here today, Matt. I guess the main thing we wanted to chat with you about today was really about catching culture, and because you're one of the newer hires at Saint Benedict Parish, and I think a lot of that the culture piece doesn't just apply to staff positions. I think it applies to other roles. But given that you came into a staff position, like, how did you catch the culture at Saint Benedict? What did that look like?
Well, I think that kind of in a funny way, I worked in a parish actually out west, and I was following Father James on Twitter at the time. And so he was kind of starting to tweet about things and about books and things like that he was talking about with parish renewal. And I kind of got the bug that, something was happening here. And so even before I moved back to Halifax, I moved back in 2014 with my wife. I knew that there was something going on at St. Benedict, and I kind of had a little bit of a flavor for it. And so when I started to come to the parish is when I started to kind of get the sense that things were different. And I think it was probably in the kind of the one-on-one interactions with people and the people I got to meet, especially the people who had been here for a couple of years. I could kind of get a different sense of how things were. So I think that was my first kind of introduction to it, was getting to know people here and meeting them.
I'm really curious. One of the things about culture is like around the question, does the fish... Is a fish aware of that it swims in water?
Right.
It's around you, and one of the things that's tricky about culture is it's based on what you presume to be normative, so you don't notice it. So whenever I hear people say, "Oh, I noticed it was different," back then, three and a half years ago, like, what? I'm curious, what was different? What did you experience as the difference?
Well, honestly, what had happened was my wife and I we went to. We were like, okay, we want to go to St. Benedict, just as a rule. We want to go here, but we should go check out a couple other churches first. And so we went to a couple other churches in the area, and there wasn't the same kind of warmth that I had experienced at St. Benedict. We wanted to give these parishes a fair shake. And there's even one that we were like, you know what, we could kind of see ourselves here. But I think that there was definitely, in the culture of St. Benedict, this idea of, if you're here, you're going to do something. You're not just going to come here and go to Mass. And I think at other churches, it's really easy to just kind of, you slip in the door, you sit in a pew towards the back, you do your thing, you receive communion, and then you leave, and it's kind of no big deal. And you're like, maybe no one noticed. And I think that appeals to some people. Like, people want that sometimes. They want to have the unnoticed experience.
Actually, it's in life that might
Catholics
be really
Anonymous.
Yes. There's a woman in my Connect group, actually. She said, when I came to St. Benedict, I wanted to be anonymous. I came here to be anonymous. And
Really?
and she's not at all.
She's in your Connect group. Yeah, she's not anonymous at all.
Exactly. That's right.
So you'd been going to St. Benedict for a while before you became a staff member. Like, how long was that?
Yeah, so I just started in September 2017. So I'd been here about 3 years. And so it was interesting. The first year I had a job. It was a lot of shift work. So it's nights, it's days. So I couldn't do anything consistent. Where I was hearing about Alpha, I wanted to do Alpha, but I was like, I don't think I can commit to that. So finally, I got a really good job after that one, and that's when I could start to get involved at the parish. And that's when I started doing slides at Mass. My wife started working in first aid. Actually, it was funny because Father James came up to me after Mass once, up to my wife and I, and he said, "So when are you guys going to start kind of paddling the boat? That's a metaphor that you enjoy, rowing the boat
as opposed to being a passenger."
Yes, exactly. And it was funny because it was like, well, actually, we're paddling the boat behind the scenes a little bit because we were truly, literally in the back of the church doing the ministries that we were at that time. And it was really kind of through doing Alpha that we started to get to know other people and started to get.
Was that the first time you'd done Alpha? Was it at St. Benedict?
Yes, it was. I had seen Alpha advertised at other churches, and I think my parents had even gone, and I didn't really have the firmest grasp of what it was. Because I think even back then, I think I walked into the back of a hall once, and it was like one of those TV stands from you see in school when they're going to show a video, and like a videotape coming in, and I was like, that's That's alpha. That's what we're talking about. and that's not what they were talking about. Not Saint Benedict at all. Yeah.
Well, that's great. So you were there for a number of years before you became a staff member. So I guess when did you catch the culture would be the question.
Yeah, I think that the biggest step was probably becoming a Connect group leader, I would say, because I was coming to the parish, I was involved in Alpha, and I think it was kind of the first step of being invested in was the main thing. It was actually funny. My wife and I, back in Saskatoon, we were involved in a couples ministry. So essentially, there was these couples. They met once a month, and they would all get together. There was like 20 of them. They all get together. They prayed, and so we thought, we should do that in Halifax. We knew couples. We made a whole little roster, and we thought, well, let's get a guest speaker. So we went up to Father Simon after Mass once. And so we pitched him on this idea. We were like, hey, what do you think of this idea? And I think that he kind of sat with it for a little bit at first, and then he kind of came back to us about a week later, and he was like, what about like a Connect group instead? And I was like, that sounds like a commitment, because it was every 2 weeks, and I don't know why I was afraid of commitment. I was married. What am I afraid of commitment for at that point, right? So Father Simon was like, if you guys feel this way, I think that he could kind of see in us that there was like this desire to lead, because we literally were like, we want to start something.
Right.
So so he said, why don't we get you, we'll get you in a Connect group, and we'll see about kind of transitioning into, eventually we'll start one. And to have someone look at you and say like, this is a good idea. And it's not like, he could have very easily said like, okay, like let's pump the brakes, guys. Like, keep doing the slides, keep being to the first stage, like keep doing what you're doing. Like it wasn't that he didn't see capacity or something like that. He fostered it, he encouraged it.
Confession time.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
You guys were in the parish for about a week, and when we had a conversation about you guys and about what we saw as the potential there, and I think that's a key thing, is that if in leadership, to be constantly asking those questions at every level, at every single level.
I agree.
Who are the people that we see that have a sense we see something in that, and there's an openness and a desire and a willingness to lead. And so I remember when I think there was a supper or something. I vaguely have this memory of Father Simon he was getting together with you guys to kind of sound you out about the Connect group, and I think I like inadvertently or coincidentally dropped in to say hello, and it was like it totally was a coincidence. It was not set up like that.
Yes, because it was when we were going to start the Connect group, and we knew it was going to be my wife and I, me and Emily, were going to be in leadership, and then we went over to our Connect group leader's house. It was actually Kate, who was on last week, and her husband Corey, and they were like, yeah, we're going to have you over, and Father Simon, and they were like. So they said, what if Father Simon helps lead a Connect group with you? Because at the time we thought he was just here for a couple of years. He was going to learn about Connect groups and move on. He has not moved on, which is good, ultimately. And yeah, you ended up, I think you said that you saw the car in the driveway, but it was funny because
I was visiting some other parishioner and I saw the car and I was like, because Father Simon is a very unique car.
Spaceship.
We call it a spaceship.
That's right.
Yeah, unique.
And and you said, I was just popping by in the area, and I was like, what is going on? It was the full court press. I was like, we're getting real courted here or something like that. Gosh, gonna have to sign a contract or something soon. So, but yeah, it was that kind of investment, and I think it helps too. It was just little conversations that I would have sometimes with people. Even Father James, you as the pastor coming in and just saying, hey, are you helping out? Are you doing something here? I like that because it reinforced to me that if I was going to be involved in the parish, you preach about that, and then you're going to come up and you're going to talk to us. And it's like, he's not just saying it, if he's saying it to me, he's probably talking to other people that are leaving Mass about all sorts of different ways people can be involved.
It's true. Yeah, he does. That I find interesting about how that all came about too, Matt, is, we have a game plan, and the game plan helps us to stay focused. It helps us to make decisions. And I remember when I'd heard that you guys were thinking about starting a couples ministry. Is a couple ministry a bad thing? No, it's a great thing. Yeah. However, how is that going to fit into our current game plan? And where was our biggest focus at the time? And our biggest focus was Connect groups. And do couples come to Connect groups? Yes. It's not necessarily a couples ministry, but it was interesting for us to try to see if we could take your passion, the things you were good at and interested in, and kind of conform it to our vision and our strategy for making missionary disciples. And because it would have been easy just to say, oh yeah, go ahead and do that. And then all of a sudden there's something else going. That's and right. we just dilute the focus that we're trying to have as a church. So thanks for saying yes.
Because at that point we had indeed articulated the strategy for forming people. And we were at the, in a sense, beginning of this phase 2, where the challenge really is to own the strategy, is to articulate the strategy, to help the parishioners own it, and then to lean into it. And one of the biggest threats to that clear strategy is all the great ideas that people can bring, especially, like folks like yourselves who are coming. You've got real experience being active in parishes, even working in parishes.
Loves Christ.
And you're in love with the Lord. You're passionate about the mission, and we always draw ideas from what we know. And sometimes we've had folks like the two of you who have had these great ideas, and they haven't been able to make the leap to move into our particular strategy. So we're very grateful.
I was great.
You both did.
I was appreciative too. I mean, it's kind of a little bit refreshing, right? Because sometimes when you're young and in the church and you have an idea, people are like, "Whatever you say is true." Because maybe you'll reach young person, right? Like, it's an idea. So to get any pushback is like, it's good. It's like when you're learning something and you do something and then your teacher says, "Oh no, you don't do that." It's kind of good. It's like, yeah, I need to know the limits and the boundaries, and that'll help me grow. Exactly, form me.
So I'm curious about what did that experience of not having your idea immediately accepted, in the fact that there was an alternate proposition in a sense. What did that teach you about the culture? And maybe you might not have used those terms. I don't know if you would or wouldn't have at that time in terms of what's normative. But did that arouse any curiosity? Was it
disappointment?
Yeah.
I think it's funny because it is a completely different. We were kind of like, whoa, okay, that's a different thing that we're going to be doing. That's it's not the same idea. And it's funny because you're kind of like, you get protective of your ideas a little bit. You're kind of like, I thought our idea was good. Yeah, and your idea is good.
I thought they liked me.
Exactly. And I think it's funny because I think I received it pretty well because as a young person, especially as a Catholic, part of that forming after you evangelize, after you have an experience of God, which I had when I was a teenager, at least for me, I reacted very much like, okay, the church knows what it's doing. And so I believe it, I believe the teachings and everything. And it was kind of the first time that I had to say, I believe what the church is doing on a parish level. I believe in what these people specifically are doing. It's not just that
not just the doctrinal level.
Yeah, it's not that, I believe the sacraments and everything. It's that, maybe there's an idea. And I think part of that is the strategy, because I think people are drawn to that. Like, people want to go to a church and they want to, be part of something bigger. And it's good if we know what that bigger is. It's not just, getting together with a bunch of people. And, I found it refreshing that there was actually, there was a vision, that there was a drive behind it, because, I want to get behind something,
I think in one ways what you may, in a sense, be describing, I don't think I've ever said it quite like this, but in terms of cultural, there's the whole culture of the place, but it's made up of distinct things. And I would say that at Saint Benedict Parish, what we saw grow over a number of years was what I would call a culture of intentionality.
Good point.
Intentionality, because the things that make the difference never happen by themselves.
Amen.
That is so true. Everything in the parish that really makes the difference, that brings fruit, if you don't lean into them intentionally, they never actually happen.
They disappear in the mess,
disappear
in the chaos.
In the mess. They devolve. If you even get things going and you stop being intentional about them, even after being intentional about them for a year or two or three, they'll eventually disappear. And so, but intentionality is something that we're not really used to in the church, except around Sunday masses. We're pretty intentional about that,
right.
Or sacraments. We're intentional about that, but pretty much everything else we're not really intentional. And again, the greatest threat to intentionality about the few things that really make the difference are not necessarily the bad ideas, but the good ideas.
Right.
Matt, so you caught the culture of Saint Benedict as a parishioner.
Yeah.
But being on staff and being a parishioner are two different things.
Yes.
So a job came up, you applied for it, you were the successful candidate. What was that like? What was your perception of what it would be like to work there? And then what was your reality? Because there's always gaps.
Right. And I think for me, there's probably even a larger one, because for a long time, I was saying to my wife, I was like, I don't really know what I wanted to do with my life. Like, for a while there, it's kind of like, I don't really know.
Yeah,
and
what's next?
I had a job and it was good. And it was kind of like, is that it? You're kind of looking around a little bit. Like, this is all I'm looking for, right?
Yeah.
But I always had said to my wife, I was like, I love to work at the parish. I love to work at Saint Benedict. And Emily was like, she would say, what do you want to do? I was like, I don't know. I don't know. It's like they've got people there. They seem to know what they're doing. They have the right people in place, the right jobs. So it's like, I don't know. I hope something comes up someday. I hope my number comes in or something like that. And an opportunity did come in, like majorly. It was communications. And I was like, well, that's a crazy good fit for me. I thought so. I hope the parish would agree. And they did, which was good. It was interesting. It was interesting being there because, in a way, it's kind of a dream job. Essentially, I saw the culture. I saw what was happening in the parish. And I was like, I just want to get on board here. Like, I just want to be a part of this. And I want to see where it's going. I want to see what I can do to help it. And so it's interesting to start the work. And a lot of what I was doing, so I'm communications coordinator. Last week you had Kate on. She was director of communications. And so she was doing a lot of the things that I was eventually going to start to take on. And it's interesting with communications at a parish because there's stuff you kind of take for granted week to week. A lot of parishes have bulletins. Ours doesn't anymore, which I think she spoke about. And so there's lots that needs to get done every week, just no matter what. Doesn't matter what's happening. It doesn't matter if it's Christmas next week or if it's Easter. These things have to happen.
And nobody knows that that's going on. That's under the hood.
Exactly. Yeah. Like the announcements happen at the end of Mass. You're like, all right, sure. Like, that's fine. It's like, well, we had to think about what that actually was going to be. And we had to make a slide that didn't look stupid so that you
and there was a bunch you said no to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
intentionality.
Intentionality, absolutely. And so it was interesting, just this process of taking things off of Kate's plate, and also for me to kind of realize what the job was in a way, and to be satisfied with this is like these communications, they have to happen. People are going to take it for granted until there's a typo or something like that.
We've never done those.
Until there's an event that's at the wrong time and people kind of get agitated, I guess. And so it's been interesting to realize, okay, there's things that need to happen every single week, but there's also that time which you talked about just in the introduction here, where we need to have that time to dream and to think about it, because where we are in communications is good, and where we could go is like way better. And it can be, and sometimes it's like, I know what I want to do, I have no idea how to get there. Like it's like
okay. That's okay.
Yeah, and so. So it's funny to think about that.
Too many dreams are stymied because we rush immediately. We were more concerned about how would I get there than the dream itself.
Right.
Like dream the dream first and get that in your heart, and then we can work out how we might be able to move in that direction.
Exactly.
And sometimes God just does some crazy things, because you shouldn't be able to get from here to there, but yet God doesn't take away the dream. And then all of a sudden God does something that only God can do to open up a door to make the dream happen. That's been my experience. That's our whole ministry. That's our whole church. It's been beautiful.
I'm curious, Matt, what did you experience as a new staff member? Because I remember what we discovered by year 4, year 4, as a distinctive culture began to emerge, we realized more and more how crucial it was to onboard people in a way that would expose them to the culture. And we did varying degrees of, sometimes we did that very well, sometimes we did it very poorly. How did you experience that, and what kind of things, in terms of your first couple of weeks, how were you, in a sense, brought in and exposed to what it meant to actually be on the parish staff?
I had it a little bit easier than some people, because I started at the same time that Bill Scollard started. And it was kind of around the same time that we had some new priests coming in. It was kind of starting the new ministry year, because it was the September, I think, 4th. It was right after Labor Day weekend. So it was good, because there was kind of even a sense in the parish then of being like, all right, there's new people. Father Simon had been pastor for a couple of months at that point, really. Mm-hmm. And so he was still getting settled. So there was kind of this sense of like things are new. Let's take it slow. I appreciated that in the first few weeks I got to go to a couple of different meetings, just to even be introduced, but also to see what that was like. And it's funny, because for all the culture that I caught before I joined the parish staff, I didn't really think about who reports to who, even. Like, I go to these meetings, I'm like, I guess your job would report to the person in charge of operations or something like that. And so it helps you kind of situate yourself. You're like, right, so these people are not functioning independently at the parish. I'm part of a team, and I have a leader, and so do these people. And so it was kind of good to even to realize, if there was an issue that came up, I could talk to my leader about that. I could talk to my team leader about that. And, they could talk to their team leader. If there was conflict, it was possible, there was a step to have that happen, and it didn't all flow through the priest, which was good because you're like, I don't want to waste his time. And so even just to see that early on and to get a sense of there's actually a structure to the teams, and a structure that I think was actually pretty healthy, right? There was no teams that I had seen that were like dysfunctional or someone was running roughshod over other people. So to see that and to get a sense of like what's happening for my team is healthy, what's happening with theirs is healthy, and it's tougher when you have a parish staff the size that we do that. We want to make sure that everything's healthy. And so you can't be like, is everybody good? You have to kind of be like, you have to break it up and be like, are you good?
Right, because it's too big to ask. So
exactly.
you need people that are more focused, and that's where the team leaders come in in terms of supporting well.
That helped a lot in the early days, for sure, and today.
One of the things that's kind of astounding me as I'm standing here and realizing I'd like to pretend we were brilliant enough to plan Matt coming on the same day we were going to talk about all sorts of parishes hiring in our network, but I had no idea that was happening, right? Like, so that was news to me. But the first half, it's like, oh yeah, how timely it is to have someone who's talking about how they came on staff and how they caught culture. But what's making me think about is something you said earlier, Father James, which is that notion of when we bring people on staff, we're trying to constantly raise leaders. And that's exactly what happened in Matt's case, right? I mean, like, we raised him as a parishioner at Saint Benedict into leadership roles, and then eventually he found his way on staff. Like, that's actually according to plan.
We've actually, very recently, you mentioned Bill. 5-6 years ago, Bill didn't even go to church.
Right.
So it's, he had a conversion, he came back to church, he started getting really involved.
Got in the game plan.
Got in the game plan.
Leadership pipeline.
Came through the leadership pipeline. We recognized in him gifts to work with people, and eventually now he's not only in staff but on a kind of a supportive role. He's supporting a team, and that's just pretty cool. That's amazing, and that's what we strive to do. I say strive because sometimes we get it right and sometimes we don't. But in terms of that link, Dan, interesting that we spoke about that in the intro about parishes hiring people, and there is a difference, in terms of where you are. We've spoken about the different phases of parish. That the first task in many Catholic parishes, when you begin to be intentional about moving from maintenance to mission, is changing the culture from a culture of maintenance, from a culture of anything will do, a culture of the status quo, a culture of convenience, and that is to get momentum on the culture shift. And when you're changing something, when you hire, you probably want to hire from outside. And that's what we've experienced. I mentioned one of our parishes is hiring someone from the U.S. You hire from outside, not simply because they were the best person who applied, or you couldn't find anyone locally, but simply because when you want to shift something, you hire from outside. Once that unique culture is moving and there's a uniqueness, then you really do well to look within and say, who can we raise up? Who can we raise up from within? Because once you've got a very distinctive culture, bringing someone in who, when you want to lean into that strong culture, when you want to go deeper into it, bringing someone in from the outside can really be very disruptive and really highly problematic.
Yeah. One of the things that we would get accused of, and we actually changed our leadership summits that we host, and when we're investing in leaders a little bit, because we wanted to give them a sense of what goes on the staff between leadership summits, because we realized a lot of people, you think about church, so you're hiring people, why? We just have Mass on the weekend. What could you possibly be doing the rest of the week? And so there's this sense that, hey, go to work for a church, that'd be a great place to retire because it'd be nice, easy, and wouldn't be hard, very little stress. What's your experience of the work ethic and the rate at which people work at Saint Benedict and coming onto that? Like, was that what you thought it would be? Was it higher? Was it lower? Talk a little bit about that.
I think that it's grown. I think it's been healthier too. I think that it's easy to get wrapped up in either the mindset of, hey, put your feet up and don't do anything else, really, like work a couple days a week sort of thing. But also it gets kind of easy to also work yourself to death as well. To redline, that's a phrase or that people use in the parish all the time. This idea that, you want to go flat out because what you're doing matters so much. But you don't think about the fact that, if I keep redlining, 6 months am I going to be here? I'm going to blackline. There's going to be nothing left. And so I think that's been good because, especially going back to that team dynamic, you can kind of look around and be like, you doing okay? Like, are you
Yes.
are you in the right place as a team? Like, I see that you're working really hard, especially sometimes there's big events that happen. And so people are focused on that for, a month at a time, and they're dealing with people, and it's like, you okay? Like, you need to kind of, maybe it's good to take some time and, step back a little bit. And which actually I have to say that Kate does a good job of that. Sometimes she'll look at me like, I think you gotta take the rest of the afternoon and just go home. It's not going to help at this point. You're just going to be kind of hitting your head against the wall. And it helps too, especially considering that we don't necessarily work 9 to 5 Monday through Friday.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
things
There's
come up.
weekends,
It's
there's
important.
evenings, there's-
Absolutely. So I think that's it's healthy when you have people around you who notice, right? And there's also that sense, especially in the back of my mind, it's like, people are going to notice if I blow it, or if I'm slacking off. Especially, if someone is like, the announcements didn't get done this weekend. That'll be easy. It'll be easy to tell that I blew it then. But I guess there's also the part of, you can also blow it by not really looking after other people, by not thinking about them as well. Because you get wrapped up in what you do. And I think a lot of people at parishes, their jobs can be really specific. They can think
Yes,
about, like,
true.
if I'm in charge of music ministry, that's all I'm doing. And so it can kind of get easy to get inward focused. It can also get really easy to think about, like, what I'm doing matters more than everything else. Like, people are doing this, but, I'm doing this part. I'm in communications, so if I don't tell people stuff, nothing's going to happen. It can get easy to get in your head. So I think it's good to have that team relation, that team dynamic, and to touch base with people too. Just to be like, what are you doing? Like, how are things going? What you're doing matters too. It's the check-in. It's that humbling too that I think is important and helps.
Love it.
Yeah.
Matt, it's been so great to have you here joining us today, but I think I'm going to cut it there for today, but it was so awesome having you. And I think, you talking about Bill Scollard and his journey, I think we got to get Bill on. So maybe we'll plan to get him on sometime soon to join the team here. There's just a couple things for those who are interested in finding out more about Divine Renovation. You can check out our website at divinerenovation.net. And I was speaking just yesterday to our UK coordinator, Hannah, and we've got an event coming up May 9th in the UK. And I got to tell you something. We were walking through the agenda for the May 9th event. It's amazing. No, it's actually amazing. You're going to be blown away when you get a chance to see it. This day is going to be a phenomenal day. It's attached to the leadership conference down there. So if you're in the UK or in Europe and you want to travel and join us there, there's a number of seats still left for that event, and that's on May 9th. Also, we've got a Divine Renovation 2018 conference coming up here in Halifax. There's still some seats left for that, so you can buy some seats if you're interested in joining us there. And you were looking at our iTunes account, the people who have liked us and loved us on iTunes. If you like or love us, why don't you hop over to iTunes and give us 5 stars? And if you don't like or love us, send us an email as opposed to giving us 1 star. That would make us feel better, if you get my drift. And, awesome. Well, guys, it's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to having this conversation again next week.